Juan Pablo. My name is Michael Brown. I'm a professor at the University of Gothenburg, and I'm involved in the Urban Freight Platform. We're delighted to be working with eClay in this conference, and we're really looking forward to a great session, a roundtable to talk about the challenge for cities of dealing with last mile logistics and all the different systems that are cropping up everywhere and growing at a tremendous pace. This is a really important topic, and earlier today some of you will have heard about the EcoLogistics project, which eClay are involved in, and that itself is very interesting. But now we're going to look deeper into the question of e-commerce, and as I say, the role of cities, what they can do to shape these developments, and to what extent they have the scope to change things and make for a better and more livable city in the context of a thing that's developed rapidly and that changes quite rapidly as well. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what the representatives from the cities have got to say, and then having a deeper discussion with them. And during the discussion period, you'll be free to raise any questions you want, and we'll take these and we'll discuss among the panel, and we'll see where we get to by the end of the afternoon. So I'm delighted, as I say, to be part of this round table. It's great to meet people from so many different places. It would be even better if we could get people to come to Gothenburg, of course, but it's also very nice to see them on Zoom. And I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce our first speaker. Timmy, you can maybe just go to the slides. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the first speaker, and after that, we're going to hand over and we're going to look at the city of Rosario, and then we're going to have the moderated panel discussion, which will involve Tumi Tran, Head of Sustainable Mobility at eClay, and Laura Iguavita, who's the focal point for Bogota in the development area here, and that's going to be a great panel, and also about looking at pilot projects very much. Then we just have a few closing remarks at the end. So I think without further words from me at this stage, I would like to introduce the first speaker, and the first speaker is Juan Esteban Martinez Ruiz. He's the Undersecretary of Policies for Mobility and District Secretariat of Mobility in Bogota, and he's had a long experience, a lot of experience in the public sector in two very large cities, Bogota and Medellin, where he's held roles involved in mobility and a lot of responsibility for different municipalities. And so this is a complicated and challenging role to have, dealing with cities within cities in some cases. And I think, as I read it, Juan Esteban, from your biography, you're very strongly focused in the transport area, but also in economics. And you've built your career around those two areas, and you have a very strong interest in the different transport systems, but also in how the city can work effectively with those systems. So we're very grateful that you have come along to tell us about what's been happening in this project area and for you as a city in Bogota. And I would like to give you the floor and let you share your screen and tell us something about experiences from your perspective working in this policy role. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Michael. And I'm gonna share my presentation. Give me 1 second, please.
Yeah, sure.
So I wonder if everyone can see the presentation.
It's good, and if you can click on the presentation mode, it will be perfect. Perfect.
Okay. So hello to everyone. My name is Juan Esteban Martinez Ruiz. I'm the Secretary of Public Policy for Mobility in Bogota. And I'm going to share some information about Bici Carga project. We are going to see the last mile delivery. So around 40% of PM10 is associated with freight transport. 48% of trips are made in lightweight vehicles, and 62% of trips have origin and destination within Bogota. Non-stores make up a large share of urban commercial activity. So in Bogota, there might be as many as 140,000 non-stores with moderate sales of goods and load storage capacity, demanding a high delivery frequency rate. So we have about 75% of trips with daily delivery frequency in the city. So how is Bogota handling all of this? The District Mobility Secretariat of Bogota, with the technical support from the World Bank Group, the International Finance Corporation, Lógica, MIT, Farol, and Despacio, implemented a 6-month pilot project that seeks to promote sustainable alternatives of freight distribution in the city using e-cargo bikes. And how is this project articulated with the sustainable urban planning of Bogota? It's articulated in 2 of the purposes of the district development plan. Purpose 4, make Bogota region a model of mobility, multimodal, inclusive, and sustainable. And purpose 5, build up Bogota region with open, transparent government and conscious citizenship. And there is a sectoral goal, generate the conditions to increase zero and low emission vehicles to 6,500 in the Bogota vehicle fleet. Now, what are we looking for? This is very important. We need to identify key stakeholders and the requirements in creating value network around cyclo-logistics for urban last mile delivery. What are the expected results? So policy to provide database policy and regulatory recommendation, scalability to define a framework to help scaling up and accelerate take-up of e-cargo bike solutions for freight delivery in urban centers, and knowledge to share results and good practices with relevant stakeholders. The next slide, we'll see how does the pilot work. So in the left side, model 1, in-house last mile distribution, where companies distribute on cargo bikes from their private consolidation centers with a radius of 5 kilometers. In the right side, we have model 2, a collaborative cross-docking platform close to delivery area for the transshipment of goods on cargo bikes. The pilot works in different areas of Bogota. We are working with variety of companies, needs, and business models. So there are 8 freight generators, 4 logistics operators, 4 local e-cargo bikes manufacturers, and 1 tech company. BC Carga is working hand by hand with projects led by the SDM, the Secretary of Mobility, in order to test cyclo-logistics on the e-commerce sector, and 50-minute city model of the project called Barrios Vitales. The success of this pilot will become a demonstrative and catalytic experience to achieve the large-scale introduction and application of e-cargo bikes for last mile logistics operation. So what does the project contribute to? As you know very well, logistics efficiency, economic impact, environmental impact, and social impact. So for example, in logistics efficiency, we have to set a criteria to define the location of cargo bike hubs based on available cyclone infrastructure, topography, security, and diverse and dense commercial activity. For example, in environmental impact, we are going to avoid motorized travels. We are going to shift to move environment-friendly modes and promote last-mile vehicle intermodality. And for example, for social impact, support the local economy, understand gender and urban logistics, and community engagement with sustainable distribution models. So here we have some preliminary results. Model 1, for 3 months, one vehicle traveled 1,600 kilometers, 270 kilograms of CO2 were avoided, and 580 deliveries were made. Operating for 8 hours, cargo bikes were able to deliver and cover more distance compared to motorcycles. And for the Model 2, in 1 month, 2 vehicles have traveled 600 kilometers, avoided the emission of 250 kilograms of CO2, and made 2,300 deliveries. Less distance travel per e-cargo trike, but the number of deliveries remained the same. So there is an increase of 3 times the number of deliveries per kilometer compared to traditional contribution model with a carry truck. This is very important. What are the challenges and opportunities for this project? So in terms of infrastructure, create bike paths for cargo bikes, and this is going to be very hard. Have micro hubs in strategic areas of the city and define zones of low or zero emissions. In terms of a regulatory framework, formulation of public policy guidelines, as I said before. In terms of technologies, we have to get technological solutions that centralize traceability, routing for last mile delivery to cargo bikes, and performance measurements of e-cargo bikes to get sustainable cargo bike design according to their particular needs. Articulation with stakeholders, guarantee of a profitable and sustainable model of retailers, encourage a more active role of carriers in a sustainable last mile delivery, and inclusion of women in the logistics sector. And the last one is there are some innovative approaches to strengthen last mile delivery. Transport pact for air quality between the freight sector, local, regional, and national authorities for fleet renewal by 2030. Mobilab is a proposal of digital solution for urban transport issues, including psychologistics, barrios vitales, integration of psychologistics to the 15-minute city model, and e-commerce pilot to test good practices in e-commerce in Bogota. So thank you very much for your attention. I have to leave for another meeting, but my team will be very happy to answer any question. And if I finish the meeting, I will come back to stay with you. So thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you very much, Juan Esteban. It was really great to hear what's happening in your city, and very much I like the point about your scaling up, and how to get this scaling up to happen, I think is something we will try to talk a little bit about. So thank you very much for such a good introduction. Thank you. Okay, that's very good. We're going to move on, Ichian, now and come with another presentation. And I think I'm going to ask you to be in charge of this. Ichian, so if you could, in this presentation, we're going to have a video from the city of Rosario, who's a partner in these initiatives. It's the 3rd biggest city in Argentina, and it's showing how they're working on last mile logistics. again with pilot projects to try and to actually test things out for real in the environment. And it's a system where cargo bikes fit into the public bike share system, and is again part of ECLA's EcoLogistics project, which we heard about this morning, and which you can find out all about by looking online on the ECLA's website and then looking for EcoLogistics. So Etienne, I think you're going to play the video for us now, and so I hand over to you.
En la región central de la República Argentina, en la provincia de Santa Fe, se encuentra la ciudad de Rosario, a la vera del río Paraná. Con una posición estratégica a 300 kilómetros de la capital del país, se consolida como uno de los mayores polos agroexportadores del mundo. Ubicada entre el corredor bioceánico que conecta el Pacífico con el Atlántico y como puerto estratégico dentro del curso de la hidrovía Paraná-Paraguay. Es una de las 3 grandes ciudades del país con cerca de 1 millón de habitantes, siendo la cabecera de un área metropolitana que representa el 43% de la población provincial. Su perfil económico se destaca por ser predominantemente comercial y de servicios, con más de 19.000 locales comerciales que representan más de la mitad de los establecimientos productivos. En el área central de la ciudad convergen una gran cantidad de comercios, servicios, equipamientos con accesibilidad y conexión. Su significativo patrimonio con un gran valor histórico, arquitectónico, cultural y social lo posiciona como una gran centralidad urbana y metropolitana. Esta área se caracteriza por la presencia de comercios minoristas y cuenta con infraestructura de carriles exclusivos, ciclovías, zonas calmas y áreas peatonales, lo que favorece la instalación de un nuevo modo de logística destinado al traslado de pequeñas cargas. Rosario es una ciudad que concibe su movilidad de forma sustentable, a través de un conjunto de acciones como la ampliación de la red de ciclovías, la instalación de bicicleteros en vía pública y la puesta en marcha de talleres y campañas educativas. Con el objetivo de promover el uso de la bicicleta como modo de movilidad, en 2015 se implementó el primer sistema de bicicletas públicas de Rosario, un transporte accesible y saludable de recorrido variable y personalizado. A partir de todas estas características, trabajamos sobre un nuevo proyecto con el objetivo de conformar un sistema público de vehículos de 0 emisiones para el transporte de paquetería de última milla destinado a comercios, servicios de cercanía y usuarios del sistema de bicicletas públicas, impulsando el uso y el desarrollo de modos de movilidad de cargas más eficientes y sustentables. La conformación de un sistema de bicicletas cargo para la logística sostenible implica en esta instancia integrar 20 bicicletas inteligentes adaptadas para transportar cargas al sistema de bicicletas públicas, generando la posibilidad de expansión a un bajo costo. El proyecto integra acciones de sensibilización, concientización, capacitación y difusión del proyecto, como la adquisición de infraestructura para brindar seguridad y ofrecer un servicio de calidad. La implementación de este proyecto permitirá fortalecer las políticas públicas vinculadas a la logística urbana mediante el seguimiento y análisis de la recolección de datos y la interacción con el sector privado. Esta iniciativa se enmarca en el Plan de Acción para la Logística Baja en Carbono de Rosario, impulsando el fortalecimiento institucional, la innovación tecnológica y la dotación de infraestructura. Es el puntapié inicial para impulsar la logística urbana con participación activa del municipio, con la acción conjunta entre distintos sectores, la ampliación de la infraestructura ciclista y la promoción del uso de vehículos sustentables en la última milla. El sistema de bicicletas cargo para la logística sostenible genera un incremento de un 10% de la cantidad de rodados del sistema de bicicletas públicas en el área central y un impacto más que positivo para la ciudad, ya que reduciría la congestión vial y en consecuencia los siniestros viales, aumentaría la eficiencia en el reparto en cuanto a tiempo y reducción de costos, reduciría las emisiones de GEI y mejoraría la calidad del aire. En un futuro, esta iniciativa puede extenderse a más barrios a partir de la expansión de Mi Bici Tu Bici y al mismo tiempo estimular e impulsar al sector privado a invertir en este tipo de vehículos para su logística. Desde hace varios años, la Municipalidad de Rosario impulsa el uso de la bici como forma de movilidad con un cúmulo de acciones que hacen que cada vez sean más los rosarinos y rosarinas que eligen este método para conectar un punto y otro de la ciudad. Este proyecto pone en escena la importancia de la logística para el sector y busca profundizar estas políticas para convertirse en la primera ciudad de Latinoamérica en contar con un sistema público de bicicletas cargo para la logística sostenible, alentando a que esta iniciativa se traslade a más localidades, aportando experiencia y conocimientos. En Rosario impulsamos formas de movilidad sostenibles pensando en el mañana. Cuidamos nuestro ambiente, cuidamos nuestra ciudad. ¡Arriba, Rosario!
Okay, thank you very much, Yiqian. That was very interesting and a good example of obviously coping with a very lively city with a lot of different uses being made of the public space, and in some cases very limited space for cargo movement. And interesting to see what can be achieved with projects like that. Now, I think now we're going to go to more of a discussion phase and talk a little bit about some of the things that we've heard about from Juan Esteban Martinez Ruiz and saw a little bit about in the film from Rosario. So I'm going to invite Tumi Tran to join the panel here. And Tumi, you're very welcome. You're working for ECLAY, where you've been for some years, I know, 10 years, and you've worked both in public transport and on freight. And that's not so common, actually, because although these things share the same network, very often people are very specialized in one or the other. So it's great to have your input as someone who sees maybe not the divide, but the connection between them. And I noticed you used the word integrated transport as a key interest for you and how to make that happen. So you're very welcome to this small panel. And I think we will be joined by Laura Iguavita. Laura, I think that's correct. And you're welcome to unmute and join the meeting. So hi, nice to have you in the session. And Laura, you're involved in Bogota in pilot projects and in making sure that things, in a sense, making sure that things happen is one way to put it, perhaps, and actually proving something on the ground in that sense and showing what's possible. So, and you're going to answer the hard questions posed by the presentation earlier on. So, I'm looking forward to talking with you and to getting to know a little bit more about what's been happening in Bogota. Now, if you're in the audience, the best thing to do is to type questions in response to this, and I'll start off with a couple of questions. But first, I'm going to just ask Tumi and Lara just to briefly say a couple of words about themselves, and just so we know a little bit more about them. So, Tumi, I hand the word to you, and then you to Lara, and we just say a few things about your interest in logistics, and in particular in making cities more sustainable with these logistics initiatives.
Thank you, Michael. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining this roundtable. It has been quite an exciting day today and quite intense as well. As Michael has mentioned, I'm the head of sustainable mobility at ECLAY, and my background is on policy, international relations and management, so a bit different from the majority of the crowd and the audience. And I come actually from the perspective of climate change and this integrated approach that the transport sector is also embedded into. And the actual interest, I find these two presentations very interesting, because when ECLAY decided to create the EcoLogistics initiative, it was really a gap that we have identified, in which a lot of cities were not looking into the space, and the logistics was and urban freight was really not planned in most of the cities, and to the point that it didn't felt even the space for cities, and instead it's very exciting to see now also pilots and especially on cargo bikes and last mile logistics, and it's also very exciting to see this holistic approach in which there is a drive for the economic, environmental, and social impact, and besides the drive for, of course, also this logistics efficiency. I see also a lot of commonalities with other regions in the number of retail shops and the connection with COVID that we will explore later on in this panel.
Great, thank you, Tumi. And Lara, would you like to just say a few words so the audience can get a sense of your involvement in this field?
Sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Laura Iguavita. I work for the World Bank on this amazing project that is called Bici Carga. Bicicarga is a pilot project that's been implemented by the District Mobility Secretariat. And I'm here as the one that is nagging everyone and telling, please, please join this Bicicarga amazing project. Basically, I'm an environmental engineer. I've been working with freight and logistics for maybe 2 years. It's been a challenge. It's been a challenge to understand the last mile logistics in a huge city as Bogota, because there's like a lot of documentations on the process that happens in Europe, on United States, but it's not well documented here in Bogota or in the region. And it's been a challenge to understand how this works and the different dynamics that we have in the city. So it's been amazing to understand the requirements that we have managed to identify on each of the stakeholders we gather with this project Bicicarga. So that is me, and thank you so much for having. And also, I'm maybe just like the face, but here is also Lina Carreño and Alejandra Lopez. They're both from the District Secretary Mobility, and also I'm here to help them answer all the questions the audience may have.
That's great. So as I said, as participants, attendees, please keep some questions coming. We have a couple of good questions already, but I think we're just going to start with a couple of questions, broader questions, and we focus on these ones. So there's time to write some more questions down here, and then we'll go increasingly some of these into some detail. So the one thing that strikes me about this is that obviously a lot of this change is, as you say, quite volatile, quite challenging at the moment with the speed of the change through the pandemic and changing behavior. And maybe, I suppose the question comes to what extent can we really influence the behavior of consumers? Consumers seem to want to buy things online, and although I think many people are very sensitive about the environment, that doesn't mean that they necessarily think about that when it comes to the delivery point. So having faster and faster deliveries is fine, but it tends to lead to fragmentation. So how can we work with the consumer and work together with the end of the chain, if I can put it like that, rather than just telling people, no, you need to use clean transport? How can we get the people who make the buying decisions to think a little bit more about this? Do you have any comments on that, maybe to me, and then come to Laura on this?
I think that this is a very tough question on influencing behavior, and there are 2 points that could be addressed. One is the individual behavior, and for instance, there could be actions towards creating awareness, especially on perhaps supporting local communities, and also to make influence the businesses. I know that it's very tough, but to influence the businesses to make this cost of these deliveries more visible, because sometimes they're embedded already in the cost, and so it makes urban freight and deliveries also more invisible because the costs are already embedded. Yeah. And then I don't have a clear solution, but cities should explore policy measures to perhaps disincentivize this same-day delivery and also favorable return policies, which are sometimes free. It's a controversial aspect because in the end it goes into the business model of the different companies. And from the city perspective, I feel that there is a bit of influence they could do. It's kind of like leading by example, for instance. And when they can influence the market to a certain extent when, for instance, they are creating procurement processes. And so if they can adopt green procurement for choosing suppliers, and there are also good practices around, like in different cities, and the European ones are leading. I have to say, for instance, Oslo has managed to create like they changed their fleets. So 71% of the fleets is zero emission, the one that is owned by the city, and also that they created also the first emission construction site. I know that perhaps when we speak about last mile logistics, we don't think about also construction, but that's one of the sectors that is influencing the city the most.
Sure, and I think it's important to kind of capture some of these initiatives, particularly what the cities can do. As you say, they have powers, and sometimes these powers can be difficult to put into place or to take action with. But if we have examples from one city, although cities are always different, of course they are, but some things can be transferred and can be scaled up in that sense. Lara, I don't know whether you want to comment on, you mentioned stakeholders, and I wondered whether you saw the consumer in a sense as a stakeholder, or at any rate, because it's tricky to know quite what to do about citizens and consumers as stakeholders. We sort of say they are, but then it's rather hard to know how to engage with them. So it would be interesting to have your view.
So with this project, like what we notice is the client that received the package or the delivery, they just focus on how the package arrived to their home. And they don't even notice how did that package got to that point. So from our experience on this pilot, what drivers have told us is that the client, that when they receive the package and they see that this package arrives on a bicycle or on a tricycle, they immediately recognize the vehicle and says, oh, this is amazing. And maybe if we just don't tackle like your responsibility as the final consumer, but like engage them with the vehicle as well, like, see, this is how we are arriving to your home, to your office, and you don't require special like infrastructure for me to deliver the package. We just need to park my bicycle and I deliver this package to you. So maybe induce this behavioral change with the help of the vehicle and the driver.
Yeah. And
also with this project, we want to understand like their perspective, the community perspective. One thing that the freight generators are really picky about is the level of service. So they don't want to change to shift the current model with fuel-based vehicles to a e-cargo bike unless they can assure that their service level is maintained. So one of the variables that we're measuring is that perception of the final consumer. So if they receive the package and they feel happy about it, or they dislike completely that their package arrived on a bicycle. So we're measuring that, and for sure we're going to share those results with everyone.
I think that's great, because I think what we need is some more. I think we have a lot of stories in this area and a lot of, well, I think this, and sometimes it's I think this because it happened to me, or happened, my colleague had a problem with the delivery. But I think actually capturing the information and gathering that, I think that's really what we also need to make a big effort with, and clearly the projects are a very good way to do that. You mentioned infrastructure, and we have a couple of the questions that came in are sort of touching on the infrastructure questions. So Yiqian, we didn't, we haven't completely agreed how we would do this, but would you like to say the question, or would you like me to just take the question from the Q&A? I can see the questions, so it's...
Mike, I think it's fine if you take the questions.
Yep, okay. So a couple of questions came in very much about the do we say BC project? Is that how to say it? BC? BC?
In Bogota, it's bici carga. It's like a bicycle, yeah. Okay. Freight bicycle.
Great, bici carga. Okay, so in that project, one of the questions is saying it's very interesting to hear about these dedicated bike lanes, and would there be bike lanes in the future possibly for these cargo bikes, or will the cargo bikes always be sharing the space? And there's a second kind of related question, which is about the safety of the other users of the bike lane space. So how about people who are using it for cycling, but also the people crossing it and are not maybe so familiar with electric power, with bicycles that maybe go a little bit faster, or are a business rather than somebody getting to work or leisure cycling. So maybe you could say a little bit about the bike lane side of it itself, Lara, and then I asked Tumi if she has an opinion about that, and we have another question that kind of follows that a little bit. So over to you.
Excellent. So that might be like my dream come true, to having bike lanes just dedicated for cargo bikes, but well, the space is limited on the city, so we have to share it. What we are doing with this project is and basically because of the pandemic, we cannot like ask for the local authority to have specific bike lanes for cargo bikes. But what we did is that we used the current cycle infrastructure that is available in the city. And we managed to locate our project on a place where we have like a big proportion of the city's bike lanes on the area where the pilot is taking place. So I think I cannot answer if the city is going to take like this path of having unique bike lanes for cargo bikes. But what we are doing is evaluating how the cycle infrastructure impacts the use of cargo bikes. Because what we notice is that obviously bikes that are two wheels and have a similar width of a normal bike, they fit on the current cycle infrastructure. But when we think on trikes or when we think on trailers, they demand a little bit more space. And even Bogota has like the biggest network of cycle infrastructure. The space is not enough. So what we are noticing with this project is that trikes tend to use the mixed lane with the normal traffic, and we need to understand what they need in terms of space. So for the moment, I think the answer is not going to be considered in the future, but we want to like do the baseline, to understand what are the characteristics and the needs of these trikes, bikes, trailers that we're implementing to suggest the local authority, this is what we need if we want to promote this kind of distribution with this amazing vehicle. I love cargo bikes.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point. And I think it's also interesting because then the project is both demonstrating something, but you're also using it obviously to learn and evaluate and think about new possibilities. I don't know, Tumi, do you want to comment on the sharing of space? Because obviously we've sort of over time, we've had different in a sense, rather different philosophies about space in cities. You know, at one point we have a lot of segregation by users, and that has some benefits, but also some big disadvantages. Now with shared space, it has many benefits, but also potentially you're mixing things that are a little bit incompatible. So as someone who's seen public transport and travel and mobility alongside freight movement, what do you make of sharing of capacity in the bike lanes, Tumi?
Yes, so I can only echo what Laura has already said, that the cities have very limited space, so it's impossible to have like a segregated lane for each mode of transport. It would be almost impossible. It would be amazing, but impossible. But perhaps what I could say is that there is a need for space also for urban freight, because most of the time urban freight is seen more like as a guest. So that's perhaps identification of areas where it makes sense to have space for urban freight and specifically for cargo bikes. And in that case of cargo bikes, I would say, why not expanding actually this mixed use type of lanes, so that, for instance, for cargo bikes, they are normally larger, and even if they can fit, it's perhaps not that safe for a bike to then overcome them. So perhaps a larger bike lanes, so that when there are no cargo bikes, so then two cyclists can also cycle side by side, so that it's a win-win situation, and that makes the infrastructure safer in general. And then cargo bikes in general needs more space than the regular bike lanes, and so it's really a matter of expanding it a bit more so that we can cover a bit more space without adding an additional lane. And I think it's also a problem for cargo bikes sometimes, so that they don't have a space to park, because then the regular parking slots are not so safe, like they are not adequate, or they use then space allocated to others. So perhaps also expanding then the secondary type of infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a very good connection actually with a specific question that came about the BC Cara project, and that's to say what happens at the end of the project period, because I think you mentioned the project period, and we've had a question here. What happens after the project's finished? Is it going to be, can it be extended? Is there some enthusiasm to do that, or is it going to be one of these rather nice model projects which people remember, but later on we discover, well, it was a good thing, but...
That's I love that question. Basically, I'm working these days to help this project to be on a second phase of the project. So what we want is, first we want to see if the obviously the private companies that are working with us, they have the interest of having a little bit more time of testing this model. Because of the pandemic and other difficulties we had with the project, we started a little bit late on the implementation phase of Bici Carga. So we want to have a little bit more time to understand how this works on the city. And so what was the other question?
No, it was what happens after after 6 months. There's an ambition to extend, but is it quite likely to be? You think it's a good opportunity to extend? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just mean.
No worries. So we're talking with these private companies, and the ultimate goal is that once we are out of this Bici Carga project, that they can continue implementing this model by their own.
Right.
So we want to understand how this business model works. What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And under which circumstances of the city location, under specific requirements of the last mile delivery, Bici Carga can work, or this e-cargo bikes can work. So this project will help them to understand that business model and to run their show with their own resources. We have a parallel thing that we have to do alongside with the District Secretary of Mobility and the National Authority of Transportation, is to understand what are the policies and what are the regulations that they're going to formulate in this micromobility topic. Because now, currently, Bogota, Colombia doesn't have like a policy that is specifically for the e-cargo bikes or for trikes that transport goods and use these new models of types of vehicles. So we have to work together with the local authority, with the national authority, and start like defining this policy and regulatory framework to help promote this distribution model within the private sector. Because one thing that we encounter with is that because the lack of this policy, private companies are not they don't want to participate.
No, they have other priorities to some extent, I guess, don't they? It's not the top of their list. I mean, I think that's one of the issues about this whole area. Toomey said freight should be it's just treated like a guest. I think that's on a good day, it's treated like a guest. Maybe often it's not treated even like that, but it's the problem, it's not the top of the priority ever. And so I think that's interesting. We have a couple of questions around this, two things that have sort of come up in the discussion. One was a little bit linked, I think, to the ideas this morning when you talked quite a lot about collecting data and comparing it between cities. And I'd like to ask something about this idea of how much of a contribution could data analytics make to a better decision making in this last mile logistics. And perhaps because Toomey was in the session this morning, I will ask Toomey to go first on this question of the data analytics and what you, in a sense, how will you connect some of these projects together? I see it as that way. And then I think after that, after we talk about the data, we come back to the question of the design of the city, because that's in a little bit embedded in some of the points you were already making. So I think we take the question of data first, and then we come back around and we talk a little about design. But Toomey, would you like to go first, because you were in the session this morning, I think, listening to the talk about the data, and you must know well the EcoLogistics project and this comparative data approach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that data is very relevant, and we often hear that basically if we don't measure it, then we are not able to manage it. So, and I think our approach was more like how do we make sure that we are able to manage it in a meaningful way as well, measure it in a meaningful way, so that it has also so that we can influence the way in which then it is managed, or at least that it informs and provide evidence for the policies. So as you mentioned also, Mike, I think it's without the data, there are a lot of anecdotal, and it's a bit hard also to discuss with the stakeholders, because then each of them have a different interest and also different perspective, and then instead with the data, as you could perceive during the presentations this morning, is that cities have felt more empowered as well to understand better the landscape of urban freight, and also being able to devise evidence-based or science-based type of policies that then can chart the way for them to create these pilots. And most of them, and then they have identified the last mile logistics as one of the priority areas for cities. It might have sounded very obvious, but at the same time, it's kind of like eye-opening sometimes to see cities discovering something new in urban freight, because it's such a fragmented sector.
Sure. And I think also it's importantly, it's about trust as well, isn't it? I mean, trust is important in this, and we have to make some hard decisions sometimes around that. Yeah.
And then there is, however, a data gap, and there is a lack of standardization, and it's hard even to compare from one city to the next one because of the differences in different cities, but also even trying with a tool to streamline this, there are like certain adjustments we had to make, and probably I'm stating the obvious, but that's something that perhaps collectively we are able to address.
Yeah. Lara, I don't know if you want to comment on the data question, because I guess as you've already pointed out, you're collecting quite a lot of information from the different stakeholders, and that seems to me to be very valuable. But maybe you also have some thoughts about this.
Yeah, I want to echo something to my friend said. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name correctly. But this project is not only happening in Bogota. Actually, we are working together with Ciudad de Mexico, Mexico City, where they're also going to implement a pilot project on last mile delivery. So it's going to be a challenge to compare our data with their data. And I think that comparing and making like to know how the last mile delivery services work on the region is going to be a challenge for us here in Latin America. And another thing that I think is really important about data is how we're going to create the routes, like the routing process of the logistic of the last mile, because we know that we currently have a lot of technological offers that they tell you how to transport from point A to B, C, D on a fuel-based vehicle with big dimensions, 1 ton, 2 tons. But the thing is that last mile with cargo bikes is completely different. It's even, they have, I don't know how to say it in English, but they are able to visit a lot of customers close together. They can use the cycle infrastructure. We have also to consider variables like how comfortable the route is, how secure the route is. And this technology that we have currently is not available to design this kind of routing. So we encourage with there is a project on the I'm going to call it SDM, the Secretary Mobility, District Mobility, that is called the Mobile Lab. It's the innovation lab, and we encourage like startups or academic centers to help us design this kind of routing, considering the necessities of the last mile with e-cargo bikes. And also another thing that is really interesting is that this last mile delivery, we tend to think about packaging, and packaging is already, we have the client and we go to that place. But one thing that we see here in Bogota is that trikes and bicycles are used to sell manufactured goods, like to nano stores, tienditas de barrio. And sometimes we don't have, I forgot how to say this in English, but we don't have the sales beforehand. So the driver has to go to the nano store and ask the owner, do you need this product or do you need another product? And if they don't need, they have to go to the next nano store. So one thing that we came across with is software development of a software where they evaluate like with IG or something really the amazing thing of technology, that they evaluate which is the probability of that making that visit is going to end up in a sale. So that thing for me was
to help them,
my
yeah,
mind.
and then you're helping to optimize this and reduce the number of wasted kilometers, or however to put it. Yeah, I think it's very interesting about the applications, because clearly these trips are very complicated with the walking question. The address delivery is different to the parking address in that sense. They have to stop in different places, and I think there's a big challenge there. And there's a nice project that took place in London called Freight Traffic Control 2050, who looked a lot at this, and they tried to do a lot of work with clustering the addresses. So I think that would be quite interesting to look into. I want to take one question that came in the meantime from the audience, and then I think we will wrap up, because I know it seems amazing, but it's actually the hour has more or less is going. We have 5 minutes of it left or something. So I want to ask you this question about low emission zones, and the question was, are there plans to establish low or zero emission zones? Could that be a way of creating the kind of incentive for this clean delivery, in this case cargo bikes we're talking about, but perhaps also other types of delivery vehicle? So maybe this comment, it comes about Bogota, but I think, to me, you might also have a comment on this from the many cities that you're working with, including the cities in Taiwan and around the other ones in India and so on. But Lara, perhaps you want to just carry on with this question for a moment, then I hand it to Tumi, and then we close up the session. So we tried to do it we tried to finish in about just over 5 minutes time. Yeah.
Excellent. So quickly, the city is currently, we don't have this no. Zero or low emission zones, but it's obviously on the agenda. Currently, we have the Barrios Vitales project, that is this idea of having a city of the 15 minutes. So all the services that one can have is enough on a distance of, distance or 15-minute walk to the service that I require. So Bici Carga is advising Barrios Vitales to implement a small pilot project with one big company of beverages, to understand how this Barrios Vitales idea can influence their last mile delivery process in that area. So I understand they're going to have like 10 Barrios Vitales zones in Bogota, and we're planning to understand how logistics can also be integrated in this holistic view of the 15-minute city model. Yeah. So not just only think on pedestrians or common people, but also think how this can also impact logistics in a barrio vital, in a small neighborhood.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And Tumi, do you want to just comment more broadly, perhaps? I mean, the low emission zones are important in stimulating actions which maybe in the future they come around because the technology is changing, but they don't happen so fast without some regulation, probably. So as ECLAE, you must see many of your members actually have low emission zones, in fact, not evenly spread around, admittedly, but many of your members have them.
Yes, so low emission zones, it's one of these areas where cities can influence actually the stakeholders. But while in Europe has been quite established to a certain extent, then in the cities outside of Europe or in the global south specifically, there is a bit of lack of examples to a certain extent, or literature around that, and then sometimes it's masked under different labels. So for instance, green zones, or air quality zone, or clear zone. And so depending on the main goal of the city and what would be perceived as acceptable, because that's the big risk of a city that is implementing low emission zone, is the fact that if the stakeholders and the community is not on board, then essentially is hard to implement. And we in Asia, we have explored with INCT. They are piloting at the moment in the Daxi neighborhood. It's a mixed-use district, and they are piloting low emission zone. And piloting is a great way for them to test and also to use that district as as living lab as well to test other type of urban freight innovations that they would like to see deployed in their city. And also it's a great way to start the collaboration with stakeholders. At the same time, another example that I would like to bring on board is also the city of Seoul has also this low emission zone, and they managed also to influence another city, neighboring city. So that's a good sign of transferability, but also of being able to, when innovation happens and it works, then other cities are also influenced by it, and they are more willing to try it. And then there is also there are some cases also in China, and then there are other pilots around the world, but perhaps they're teeny tiny, and then perhaps they will bloom soon.
Okay. No, that's it's a very good point. I think with the time we should probably stop and draw it to a close. I'd like to just make a couple of remarks about it before thanking again everybody for this. I mean, it seems to me that there's some interesting features here in what we talked about. One is that, of course, we can find many examples of projects. We're not, to be honest, we're not so short of projects in some ways, but projects are still very important to keep the momentum of things going. So I think it's very good that we have projects. And what I sense when you talked about the projects here today is that these projects are more grounded in a greater sense of realism than perhaps projects were in the past. I think in the past we thought if there was a project, let's launch a project and they will come. They will come to the project and it will change everything. And we know that this is not the case. It's very difficult to get people to change things, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have the projects. But when we have the projects, we need the people like you, Lara, to go and really find out exactly what's going to make this stakeholder get involved and change something. And then I think those experiences are best shared by some kind of mechanism like eClay. And of course, researchers are interested in playing their part in those things. So for me, that realism was something which I appreciated a lot in the presentation and then in the discussion. And I think that's important. The second thing, I wanted to steal a phrase from, well, it's from Peter Hall, who's a maritime expert. And he says that if you work in maritime side, you often go to visit a port and you're looking for comparisons between ports. And then he says the ports people will say to you, seen one port. Well, you've seen one port, they're not the same, so, and you have that with cities to some extent. You've seen Rosario, very nice city, very attractive center, not the same as this city and not the same as that city. But in the project, you described how you have in this project the case of comparing with Mexico City. Now, of course, the cities aren't the same, but comparing something with another city, that's a valuable thing to do because probably some things are the same. Some of the things that you found with dealing with the stakeholders will be the same. And some of the ways that things developed will be the same. So I think we really have to become very smart at sharing across the cities. And I think we've gone a long way, but we still have a big step to go, because if we just rest on the fact that, well, every city's different, of course it's natural that they can do this and they can do this, but they can't do this, we're not going to really get any scale with any speed at all. And I suppose that's the third point that I would like to end on, is that I've been working researching this for a long time, and I think we really have to push very, very hard now to scale some of these things up, because we've got good initiatives which work and we know they work, but the challenge now is to really get some of these things more scaled up. And I think everybody needs to move a little bit together on this, between different disciplines, between different authorities within cities, the planning authority with the transport authority, and also between researchers and practice in that sense, because we really have to see right now to make more effort to see how can we scale these things up. They don't just get scaled up, and we therefore need to work very hard at that. So I think this was a great session to follow on from this morning's one, very different in what we talked about, but very connected, especially when you came back to the data and the importance of that in building a case that we can use to argue for something that needs to be changed, and we can then go further and say, and this is how it can be changed. So I think that's a very powerful and good argument. So I enjoyed a lot hearing your viewpoints about that. I just want to just close by thanking you both again for a very interesting discussion, and thanking also the people who took the trouble to make the presentation. So please pass our thanks to Juan Esteban Martinez Ruiz. It was really nice to hear from someone in the city who showed such engagement in what is happening there, and that was great. And also thank you for bringing your colleagues to the meeting and allowing them to share the time with us. And for Tumi, we thank you as eClay for taking part in today's event, but also for the interest we've had in discussing different things around the project. So it's much appreciated by us, and we enjoyed it a lot. So thank you for that, both of you. And I'm going to close the session in that sense, the eClay part of it, and just make a kind of housekeeping announcement. That is to say that there's still another session that will start shortly, and will go on, I think, well, it'll start at 1700 Central European time. So it's gradually getting to be a more civilized time in Bogota. So I think maybe that's good. Maybe I think we will have some presentations from people in Colombia about their research, and also from Brazil, I think, in this next session, and also from the west coast of the US. So there'll be a session that starts at 1700 and will go on, I think, until 1830 Central European time. So very welcome to everybody who's participating in this session to attend that. Even if you can't attend the whole session, please drop in for a couple of talks and have a look at them in parallel, have a look at the things you're interested in, and please join us for that. And tomorrow we have one more set of parallel sessions, and then we will have a closing at 13:30 in the afternoon. So please have a look at the program, and if you think there's something interesting, then please show up, and by all means participate where it's possible to do that. And the final point just to say is that so that we can keep you up to date on anything that changes, we made a slightly different start to the web page on the conference web page, not the Urban Freight Platform web page. It's a sub part of that, the conference web page. And so please check for updates there. And going back to this question of data and the importance of freight, I encourage you to fill in a questionnaire that's been the work of the OECD and the LSE, London School of Economics Cities Group, who've been looking at change in cities, and they're thinking about not just how freight will change, but importantly, they are including freight in their assessment of what needs to be changed and what government can do to support change in cities, what national government can do. So please take the time as experts in freight, as those engaged in different parts of the freight world, please take the time to complete the questionnaire. It is not a very long questionnaire, so it's not something that's a huge amount of time. Please complete it, and I think with more information and evidence, they will be able to show a stronger case for there being this kind of engagement, and it will be a better informed result. So I encourage you to do that. And on that note, I want to thank all of the people attending this session. Thank you for great questions that came up. I think we managed to answer them. Maybe we were quite quick with one or two maybe, but they were great questions. And thank you again to all the people who took part as presenters and the people supporting this initiative. So big thank you, and a big thank you to Ichian, who's been very much the person who's put on the video, made sure it all joined together and coordinated the different sessions and the different speakers going one after the other. So thanks a lot for that. And I'm going to stop and we'll close the session now. Thank you very much.